Hey guys, how's it going? Ghostly Rich here today, and today we're going to be putting this 4-inch 25-foot flexwick conduit into our attic space, which is, for me, the drop ceiling. The reason why I'm using this one and not the other one is because I like the fact it's insulated and it matches the piping that is already there. It is double the cost of uninsulated, but you know what? I like it also because it gives it a little bit more protection against other things that are going on in the ceiling, and it's just basically like that extra piece of protection with it being insulated. So what I did is I picked this up. I think this was like 60 bucks Canadian. I'm running 4-inch for everything because I'm only having a 30-inch stove. So I'm going to have a very small range fan. It's not going to be very big at all. And on top of that, I'm also using this for the dryer. So the first thing to do is distinguish that's my outside wall. This is also an outside wall. So the thing is I don't want this blowing into my backyard. I'd rather it blow off to the side of the house. This will be up to you which way you want to go about this. I would rather mine go out through the side of the house. If you would rather, you could have it go out to the back. Now, things that I would keep in mind is if you have it go out through the side and you can put it a little higher, kind of keeps rodents away from trying to get into your intakes. Next thing, the other reason why I kind of like it being on this side rather than the backyard is just for lint. Also because I have a crazy dog that likes to rip things apart, so it would probably try to rip the tip off of the guard that's off of there, and then something will crawl up inside. I know my dog won't fit, but the neighbor's cat might. So that's why, rather than just leaving that exposed, I'm going to, at this point, cut open the box, which I've already done. You can see it's half unsnaked. I want to kind of cram it back in the box, and I want to flip it up there and then basically pull it out of the box and have it come around. Now my stove, I've already measured out, is going to be over here. So I'm going to put near the top end of that drywall is about where I need this to pop out of. So it's going to go in there, out through here, and then go along and to the side of the house. From this point, as you can see, I've got one run up there because I put one box over to here, which goes into my utility closet. This one will be going somewhat over here and connecting to an angled joint. We will see. Or, yes, that should be probably what's going to go on is I'm going to end up putting an angle joint here. And that way it just goes from here, round into here, and then I will have a stackable washer dryer right here. And this is already wider than the stackable washer dryer, so I'll have enough room that when I grab a dryer pipe that clips onto here to be able to go up and behind the system, or well, usually the dryer sits on top because it's the lighter of the two. Usually your washer will go on the bottom because it's full of concrete, and then your dryer sits on top. So in that case, if your dryer pipe's up here, then it just has to go from there to there. From this point, if we were to look at this, we'd want to have maybe a box. If you want to take a box and mount it onto here with a dryer receptacle on it, and then you would grab your clamp, which is down here. What you do is you would cut this back and strip it, and then you take that, slide it on, and then use your clamp and tighten it on to the other end. Once you tighten that up, it'll hold it here. And then you can always get the quick disconnecting ones, which is kind of cool. So that way you can quick disconnect. And then that way when you drywall, your drywaller will be able to cut around, leave that exposed. As for the one over here, it's going to be tucked away in a cabinet. So what you're going to want to do is basically measure out the height of your cabinets, or where you think your cabinets are going to go, and we'll go from there. I'll give you my measurement in a second. So taking a look here, just to show you what I did, I cut a patch out there, kept the drywall, so that way I can put a couple blocks of wood technically and remount that piece if I want to. The cabinets are going to be hiding that piece, so as long as I It is an outside wall, so I want to move that insulation back around after I'm done. And I want to get that in there, but I don't want my pipe to get squeezed. So put my hand up it, and there is no compression happening on it, so it's fine. Again, I'm only putting in an electric stove that is 30 inches, so I'm not going to have a very strong range hood here. So I'm not really worried about having to do a 6-inch. If I was doing like a gas range, then I would want to make sure I'm doing a 6-inch tube, not a 4-inch tube, just so I can get a higher CFM fan to clear out the area. But in this case, I'll be fine. But yeah, I've got that hanging there now. Next thing to do, and I'm going to do that tomorrow, is I will go outside. I have to remove some of the siding, so that way I can cut open and install these vents. So I got the ones that close when the draft isn't on, as you can see. So it just closes, keeps backdraft from happening. If you want to, you can use it or lose it. So how this works, this front piece pops off like so. Now, some people, which I've seen for dryers, they'll actually remove the backdraft door because they don't want this to impede the dryer whatsoever or to catch lint or anything like that. So they will actually pull this off and leave it. But what we're going to do is basically pull off enough siding that this can go underneath. Then you'll cut the siding out around this, and then screw this in. Screw the siding if you want on top of it, or just enough so it's over top. And then you slip that on over top around the siding. And then that way it doesn't keep it from having a perfect seal against the house and keeping water from entering around the cut that you're doing. And that is the perfect seal way. So next thing we're going to need to do is go to where we want to, and we're going to have to cut a 4-inch hole. Now the best way to do it is to see and measure. Like for example, use something that you can use as a measuring spot. For me, I have this windowsill, so I'm going to measure off the windowsill and then go outside and cut at that height from which I desire. Now, to make sure you don't hit a stud, what you can do is look on both sides, make sure you do your measurements, measure twice, cut once, and you just take your either a 4-inch hole saw or you're going to use a jigsaw, but draw a pilot bit first. So that way what you can do is you put a pilot bit. First you'll cut out the drywall up there, like if you have that like I do, and then on the piece of wood on the outside you will draw or you make yourself a 4-inch template and poke a hole in the center. Drill your drill bit right through the center, and then what you can do is use that round template to go through and either hack through the wall or whatever way you want to do it. Go through with a hole saw or go through with that. Now you don't have to go through this way. You can actually get the ones where it goes on and then you just pump it full of silicone. I'll leave it up to you, whichever way you want to go about it. If you have brick, hopefully you have an existing hole already. If not, then you'll need a masonry bit and you'll have to have a lot of fun with that. But in this case, I don't have to do that. So coming up and over here just to show you what I've done. Coming up the ladder. So I wanted to keep it nice and close, but this actually lined up with my camera. I don't want it where my camera is. So I cut out the drywall right beside it. And there's a 2x4 here, but right here is perfect. I'll totally get the hole in there. And then what I did is I went over to the other side because I wanted to make sure I didn't end up on the seam of two different ones of my siding, which, I mean, it doesn't really matter if you do. It's just, if you can get it in the center, then usually, since the siding screws don't sit flat, this is the center of the siding here. So see how I can actually pull it away? So when I hole saw, it'll come through here, and then what I will do is I won't go all the way through. I'll go into the wood, then I'll back off, then come from this side, then go through the siding. So that way it doesn't mangle your siding. And it'll also leave a nice little drill mark poking through, which you'll line your drill mark up and go through here. Then what we're gonna do is, after we have a little bit of give in here, we're gonna unhook the channel from right here. And when we unhook the channel, what it'll allow us to do is put in our insert. So we'll slip in our insert. If we can pull this enough away, you basically want to try and work your insert around this, because we're going to seal our insert against the plywood behind here to make that barrier, and then we can also silicone the pipe from the other side. So for right now, let's go ahead and get our first screw hole through. As you can see, right through here, and then as I went through here, I seen daylight. Now that I've seen daylight, my plan is to go through, and what you want to do is see that hole from the other side. Once you see daylight and you see that hole, I can feel the seam right here. So if you want to, you can even take your drill bit once you cut this, which is what I'm going to do, put it right to that center hole so I can see that's the absolute center, and then go through the other side on the vinyl siding or the wood siding. Then it doesn't shatter and look really bad. You just want that hole all the way through. See how you can see the light coming through? This is actually because one of the blades got in a little deeper. But right here is my hole. So next thing, take my hole saw and drill it out from this side. And go slow, don't go crazy, because if you go super fast, you'll just shred this and it could catch. But if you go super slow, well, not super slow, just slow enough, and go slow and breezy through it. So if you're on a seam like so, you can actually just undo the J channel to get at the paper like so. And why is this better? Because you'll see. Now I'll be able to disassemble and put that right underneath and slip this back on the J channel. Give me 2 seconds. If you got the 2-piece version, you slip the top piece off. And this, you slip underneath, and underneath there, we might have to take off a little more, but we'll see. Basically, what you're trying to do is line that hole up in there. And then what we'll do is, if you take a look there, we're going to have to trim the siding around this. And then, after we trim the siding around it, so it's nice and flush, before we put this in and screw it in, you throw a whole bunch of silicone around the hole here, because that's going to seal against the paper that's on the outside. And when it presses and seals, you'll level this, we'll screw it, and then we'll put the siding over top. You'll see in a sec. So it's in underneath here, you can see it. I just tucked it in under the other sheet here. If you end up popping off a siding panel, just remember when you put the nails back on, not to sink them all the way. There's a reason why these nails aren't all the way there. It's because siding always moves. So you should have some space. Like this guy, I just noticed the guy who did my siding, he actually nailed this one really tight. Should not be in this case, because your siding, as it heats up, it moves. And if you put those nails in super tight, it can't move. So next thing I'm going to do is, you can either take a pair of scissors and you just want to trim it as close as you can, but it does have a cheater strip. Like, see how it's got some overlap on the back end? So you do have some room for error if you overcut a tiny bit, but just don't go Edward Scissorhands and just go too nuts with it. Next thing you want to do is, basically, once you have it level, mine still turns a little bit in here, so that way I can level it. And then you're going to throw some screws in here to hold this flat, but only once we cut open our silicone tube and silicone the whole back, because we want to get that nice and silicone. So pull it out, throw that big bead of silicone all the way around so it seals nicely against the paper. And when you screw it on, it'll make that extra silicone. If you want to, you can even silicone the edge of the circle. So let's pull this out for a second. So silicone here on the round ring and silicone the back plate. Stick it in, and then you can drill in a couple screws. Or if you want to, use a couple framing nails, whatever you want to do. So I moved this piece out of the way because this hole is very, very tight fitting, which is good, but at the same time, I want to make sure I get the entire depth, and you can see those little ridges on there. So what I'm actually going to do is just take a little bit out. And this pen sucks, but literally just go with my jigsaw and just take out a tiny bit more. Not much, just basically skimming it until it fits snug in there. but I don't want it too snug because I still want that pipe to slip inside without obstructing these ridges. So like I said, this is 4-inch. I could have probably done 4 1/4 if I would have had that hole saw. So if you wanted to, you could use 4 1/4 and you'd be fine. But with the 4-inch, I'm just going to go a little bit bigger with my jigsaw and just cut the hole a tiny bit. From this point, take your silicone, cut the tip off, poke it, put it in, put a bead around here, a bead around the circumference of the circle, and then a bead around the flat part right here. And that way it seals against the paper, and then this will help seal the wood. After you've done that, and like I said, you could put a bigger bead around here depending on how big or how much bigger the hole is. But yeah, just goop it really nice and goop it really nice so it makes a nice seal. Slip it into the hole, and after you slip it into the hole, then level it and then put a couple screws in. Like I said, nice thick goop, and just slip it on. After you get it like so, you can start putting your siding back on. Can be fun. If you're taking pieces off, make sure that when you're putting it on, you put it on the hook, but you don't yank up as you're screwing it on. You'll hook it on, and then you basically let the weight of it do its job. Because if you yank it up too much, what will end up happening is the siding won't have room to expand. When you're popping this back on, thing to get is once you fold, like, it's gonna hurt your fingers for the first bit, but you fold it, and after you get that first piece to hook on, you literally just push down like this, like push down towards the ground, and you'll feel it go push the siding down and then lock in. And then once you get a streak going, you're golden. Other than that, from this point, all you would do, take your cover, fit it like so, slip it on. As you can see, I have both my dryer vent and my bathroom vent right here. Now to go inside and put our tubes in. Now I'm gonna have to cut those aluminum tubes down because they stick out quite far. We're gonna need to shorten those up. So I measured off, I only need 4 inches of this. Then my pipe will slip over, I'll put my clamp on, and I'm done. So even 4 inches is still a lot of meat on there. I just would rather have a bit more than not enough. So I'm gonna leave the 4 inches on here. I measured 4, made my marks. Now from here, you can either try and go around it with tin snips by cutting up the center, and then if you wanted to, you could cut up the center here, bend it, cut it, or you could just start it off with a hacksaw and then cut around it with your tin snips, or you could try and undo the S-lock if you really wanted to, or the snap lock. I'm just going to do what I usually do, start with a hacksaw, and then after I start with a hacksaw, then I'll cut around it with some tin snips. So when you get and you pull all your slack, I've got it enough because I want to leave it along this beam, just like I want to leave that one along that beam. What you're gonna do is you cut it with your X-Acto, you go through the inner casing as well. You'll see you have the wire here. Just cut the wire with a pair of scissors or tin snips. After we do that, we're going to fold back as much of this. We'll roll it back like this. And when we roll it back, we'll roll it back to about here so we can slip this plastic part onto our metal piece. Now, if you're using a clamp, you'll take one of these clamps, make sure it's easily accessible, from which if you go this way or this way, because you are going to have to tighten it, and then you would slide it not all the way to the front if you don't want to, but a little bit up from the front of the base. And what that'll allow is, let's say you put this midway and you tighten this really tight and you still have meat on both ends. What it allows is if you ever go to replace that vent, then you can pop it a little bit out from the siding and then see how you're going to couple that one to your new vent hood. Now the reason why I bring this up is because if you use a clamp, it won't be that easy to come through, which I would rather just have it full out protected. What you can also do as another measure is just use your tin tape, and if you put the foil tin tape around it, that's what some people do. I'm just like to have that extra clamp as well, if I want to, the tin tape, just to give it a little bit more strength, rigidity, so that way I know for sure that's not going to pop off inside the wall and then cause even more issues down the road. So I'll leave that up to you if you want to just leave it with tin tape wrapped around it to hold it, or if you want to add a clamp as well. So for now, just cut this and then we'll fold that back. So if you take a look, I have it aluminum foiled all the way around. Now if you see any daylight through, if you really wanted to, what you could do is throw a little bit of caulking around the rim, and I'll leave that up to you. It all depends on the person, and again, if you want to, you can use the clamp or you just use the tape. I use the tape, and you know what? It ain't going anywhere. This will rip before that tape rips, so let's go from there. Next thing to do is just fold this sock back down and just get it nice and snug around there, just like that. And this, I can just unravel and push over here, and we should be good. That's it. Now, go to the other side. If it's sticking out like that, then you're hoping from there you'd have to put your cabinets on, then you'd put that vent piece on, which would go into your range hood, and then you'd foil tape that. But that's it for running these vents. I mean, for that one, you could get a wall plate for the dryer, depending on what height you want to go with it. Now, let's say one of your runs isn't long enough. You would want to have a metal coupler and 2 clamps, and make sure that coupler is nice and strong because you don't want it bending. But what you would do is foil tape it, and you would go from there. I thought I had a coupler here. Apparently I do not. Oh, there it is. I do have a coupler here. So right here is what the coupler looks like, and you would slide it in between the 2, clamp, or tape a whole lot, and then you can extend your run. For me, I'm not going to bother right now because, sorry, that's some extra tin I had. I have this right here, which is actually going to go to the dryer port, which will be up here. So it's actually going to be, I'm probably going to put a 90-degree elbow on this, so it comes around like that, and then just stick it right into it. But other than that, that's just a run through of how I ran it. Now, if you want to get this up off of the wood or to secure it, you can use that ribbon tape. It's got a whole bunch of holes in it, and you could just tighten it and have it hanging right off the rafters rather than off of if you have a drop ceiling like me. So that way, if there's any vibration from a subwoofer or something, it's not going to vibrate. For me, I'm going to have tons more insulation up there. I'm planning on packing that a bit. I do have central air, so it is going to get echo no matter what I do in here, or while you'll be able to hear it because I can't really muffle when you have central air, but you can try your best. So that's what I'll do. I'll throw in some insulation. And then if you cut through any vapor barrier like I did, make sure that you fold it back over and you throw lots of tuck tape, that red tape, or at least seal up that vapor barrier